Hello, this is Nathan Hanamaikai. This is my presentation on Chapter 9 of our leadership book. The title is Leading Yourself. The main points of this chapter are to apply leadership principles to yourself first. It looks at the body as a sort of organizational model that we can learn about organizational leadership principles from. It treats the ego as an organism within that model, and it gives a lot of insight in doing so. And lastly, talks about caring for the human organism in the same way that we should care for the organization as well. So to the point of discussing the body as an organizational model, just a real quick rundown of how our bodies are put together and a little bit of insight into what the function of the body is. We start with the bodies as a whole, and the body is made up of different parts, but all those parts are made up of cells, and there are bacteria in our bodies that are beneficial, and some of which are not beneficial to us, but which are part of us, part of our body. Each cell has cellular components, and the book particularly makes mention of the mitochondria, which are the energy source, the powerhouse of the cell. Now, each of these things needs to be working in order for our bodies to work. A lot of times, though, the things that we do to our bodies work against or in contradictory fashion to the other processes of the body. Taking a look at that same model and applying it to an organization in general, you start with the organization at the top. And then we define different departments of functions such as accounting, marketing, sales, etc. Each of those departments are made up of employees, and each of those employees has a job because of the customers. In higher ed, or any sort of educational institution, we have departments of discipline. So this is like the chemistry department or the College of Sciences and Health Sciences or Computer Science. In each of those departments we have staff or faculty, and again, each of those staff faculty members have a job to do because of the students who are here. Thus the students and the customers in the organizational model are like the mitochondria within the cell. Each of them need to function for the institution to exist as a whole, but at the same time, each works against one another to some extent. And it's no wonder with all these competing and, or it is a great wonder why with so many competing and contradictory functions and processes that anything beneficial gets done. Now let's talk about, since we're talking about health and bodies and how they function, let's talk about our worst habits. One of our worst habits is that we ignore how our body is trying to communicate with us. We ignore this bodily communication when our body says it's tired, when it says it's jittery or nervous, when we have reflux, we experience stress or pain. What do? Well, we take a 5-hour energy, we have a drink or have a smoke, or we medicate it. There, it's fixed. We are no longer tired, jittery, nervous, have reflux, experience stress or pain. Of course, we treat the symptoms, but the root cause is still there. This ignorance of our bodily communication will eventually come back to bite us. Our body will eventually go on strike, effectively, and that's when we have to call in sick. So, with all that said, with the organizational layout, with this recognition of our bodily communication that it actually does exist, and that most of the time we ignore it, who really is the boss of our bodies, of our organization, our organism, as we're talking about? This is where we start to talk about the ego. In the book, it talks about the ego as the center of us that tells us what we should do to become what we want to become. But that often works at odds of the perpetuation of our organism. For example, we're tired, so we take a 5-hour energy instead of giving our body the rest that it needs. Or is it the organism? The organism, on the other hand, quietly and without direction from our ego, works tirelessly to maintain our very existence and life. It repairs itself, and it sends messages up the chain when it needs something like food in order to keep working and functioning properly. There's an eternal battle between the ego and the organism. The ego demands control of all the processes. It wants to be in control. It needs to control threats. And the rest of the body, which just goes about its business getting the work done. The ego is that part of us that says that, for example, financial stress and strain is a threat to our existence. Therefore, it drives us to stay up, or get up earlier, stay up longer, work harder, so that we can accomplish more and earn more and have more, so that we can perpetuate our life and have a better life. But that works at odds with the organism that's simply trying to get the sleep that it needs. The ego looks at an egg and says that the egg is just the hen's way of making another egg, while the organism says that a hen is just the egg's way of making another hen. So who's right? This isn't just another example of that struggle between the ego and the organism, and a spin on which came first, the chicken or the egg. Now, the ego does really well at reacting to threats, but it doesn't do well at determining when the threat has passed. It has no vested interest in determining that the threat has passed. As soon as the threat has passed, the ego takes a back seat, because the ego is the center of us that keeps us alive and is concerned with our perpetuation. But if there's no threat, then there's no need for the ego. So it works at odds with the organism that simply wants to maintain our being and perpetuate our bodies, perpetuate our species. But the ego is concerned with itself. This cycle of threat assessment on the part of the ego leads to living in a state of emergency as a way of life. The ego doesn't want to be out of power. So what motivation does it have to fully solve problems or say that you are out of the woods and the threat has passed? If your sole job is to steer clear of crisis, you will look for new crises when one has passed. If you don't, your very existence is called into question. This is part of what the authors of the book say. This reminded me of an article that I read prior to the last election in Time magazine from March 2012. It brought the issue up of immigration, and that how if politicians on both sides were to actually solve the immigration problem, no politician would be able to use it as a platform to polarize the vote. So essentially making the argument that if they were to actually solve it, how could they justify their existence? The same thing goes here between the ego and the organism. So, in light of this, what are the effective leadership tendencies? What are the tendencies of a leader who actually does try to find harmony between the ego and the organism? 3 that are brought up in the book are that a leader is willing to make decisions, but allows others to act. A leader empowers others. They believe that that is true leadership. And the feedback they get from the organism, from others within the organization, is integral to their ability to lead and influence the direction of the organization. But without that feedback, it's very difficult for them to do so. Just as our body gives us feedback and cues. Um, or a good leader in an organization takes feedback from his organization as well. One thing that's brought up as an advantage and a point of conversation in the book is this idea of a fresh eyes advantage. This is that thing that we experience when we come into a problem that somebody else has been belaboring, and we see a solution right away, and they say, "Wow, I would have never seen that." That's what the fresh eyes advantage is. The idea behind this is that somebody comes into the problem believing that the perpetuation of the organism is key, and that obsolete assumptions of success are not. They're more open to seeing more possible scenarios of solutions. The book authors bring up the idea and the reality, really, that women excel in new industries, and when they do, they end up bumping up against that glass ceiling, and when they bump against the glass ceiling, they leave the organization and start their own competitive, head-on businesses with the corporate dinosaurs that they leave behind. This is related to a point that I brought up previously about historically marginalized population groups, but that women are preconditioned to be better leaders and managers than men by virtue of the struggles that they've had to go throughout history, with gender roles, and those things require the development of skills such as mediation, anticipation, negotiation, compromise, being able to see the needs of others, being able to solve social problems, being able to balance multiple and simultaneous demands, and the fact that really women are more comfortable with chaos, where men need to have more control. And in the ever-changing world and industries that all of us are in, or will be in, being comfortable with constant change or chaos is highly valuable. In order to be able to accomplish this, to be able to manage and lead without controlling everything, your vision needs to be clear. It needs to give a clear sense of what you want to be accomplished, but not how. We shouldn't be worried about micromanaging through our vision. A clearly set vision allows employees to give their own interpretation of it, and when they're able to do that, it creates greater buy-in because of that personalization of the vision. It therefore translates into more believable application and versus a fake sense of commitment, and this is really perceived by customers and students. This allows them to infuse their own creativity and into your vision, and they're more likely to embrace and own the result. A clearly communicated vision, to borrow some vernacular from Good to Great, your clearly communicated vision will attract the right people to the bus, and it will repel the wrong people. So this reminded me of an idea called intuitive eating, and for lack of time here, I'm going to just bring all these up. This is the idea that we can manage our health by listening to the communication of the body. It creates a healthier relationship with our body and allows us to live our lives more fully. There was a study done, a comparison study done, where the people who, of women who tried intuitive eating as opposed to traditional dieting experienced improvements in all of these areas. And in essence, it improved their long-term health. They were more likely to complete and stay with the intuitive eating program versus about half the people that dropped out of the regular diet program. So here are the discussion questions. I will let you read those, and hopefully I look forward to a lively discussion and informative discussion with you on Monday.